What is your integrity worth for a struggling waitress named Paloma Darcy? That question wasn't a philosophical debate. It was a $20,000 cash offer laid out on a linen tablecloth. Buried in debt and desperate to save her sick brother, the money was a lifeline she couldn't afford to refuse. But she did. What she didn't know was that in the shadows of the very same restaurant, a reclusive, cynical billionaire was watching her every move. He wasn't just there for a meal. He was there looking for one person he could trust. Her simple, powerful act of defiance would set off a chain reaction that would shatter both their lives before rebuilding them into something unimaginable. The clatter of porcelain on porcelain was the soundtrack to Paloma Darcy's life. It was a rhythm of survival. Each plate cleared each table, wiped another small step away from the financial abyss that threatened to swallow her whole. The Gilded Spoon, a restaurant that prided itself on its approachable luxury, was a world away from her own reality. Here, patrons debated the merits of a $100 bottle of wine, while Paloma's mind endlessly calculated co-pays, prescription costs, and the ever-looming rent on her cramped one-bedroom apartment. Her life was a fragile balancing act, and the fulcrum was her 12-year-old brother, Leo. Leo, with his bright, intelligent eyes and a smile that could disarm armies, was fighting a battle far too big for his small body. A rare autoimmune disorder was methodically attacking his nervous system. The standard treatments had proven fruitless, and their last hope was an experimental program at a private clinic, a program with a price tag that sounded more like a ransom. Every night after her shift ended, Paloma would take the 2 buses to St. Benedict's Children's Hospital. She'd slip into the dimly lit room, the sterile scent of antiseptic, a constant reminder of their predicament. She'd read to Leo from his favorite fantasy novels, her voice a low, steady murmur against the rhythmic beeping of the machines tethered to him. One day, Paloma, he'd whispered last night, his voice thin, "I'm going to be a knight and I'll fight dragons for you." She had smiled, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. "You're already the bravest knight I know, Leo." The promise she had made to their dying mother years ago echoed in her mind with every beat of the heart monitor. Take care of him, Paloma. Always. She was trying. God, she was trying. But trying wasn't paying the bills. The stack of red-stamped envelopes on her kitchen counter was a testament to that. Tonight, the Gilded Spoon was buzzing with the low hum of money and influence. Paloma moved through the maze of tables with a practiced, efficient grace that belied the exhaustion pulling at her bones. She delivered a seared scallops appetizer. To table 7, refreshed the water at table 9, and took a dessert order from a couple at table 4 who had been complaining all evening. She handled it all with a polite, detached smile, a mask she had perfected over the years. A new patron was seated in her section in a secluded corner booth. He was alone, dressed in a simple, well-tailored dark grey suit without a tie. He wasn't flashy like many of the other diners. There was a stillness about him, an observant quality in his deep-set eyes that made him seem out of place. He ordered a black coffee and the steak medium rare, and then simply sat watching the theatre of the restaurant unfold. Paloma pegged him as a businessman perhaps waiting for a late colleague. She gave him the same professional service she gave everyone else, and moved on. His name, according to the reservation, was Ambrose Ellsworth. It meant nothing to her. Half an hour later, another man arrived, oozing the kind of manufactured charm that set Paloma's teeth on edge. He was handsome, in a glossy corporate way, with a watch that probably cost more than her car. He wasn't there to meet Mr. Ellsworth. Instead, he took a table on the opposite side of the room, one also in Paloma's section. He introduced himself as Gregory Shaw and proceeded to be the most demanding customer of the night. His steak was too red. The wine wasn't breathing correctly. The ambient lighting was giving him a headache. Paloma handled his complaints patiently, her smile never wavering, even as her feet throbbed, and the image of Leo's pale face swam in her vision. She felt the quiet gaze of the man in the corner booth, Ambrose Ellsworth, on her a few times, but she dismissed it. He was probably just bored. As the evening wore on, the two men became focal points of her section. Mr. Ellsworth remained silent and watchful, a stark contrast to Mr. Shaw's loud, attention-seeking performance. Paloma found herself navigating the space between them, a gulf not just of physical distance, but of temperament. One man demanded the world and was never satisfied. The other asked for little and seemed to see everything. It was close to closing time when Gregory Shaw flagged her down, his demeanor suddenly shifting from petulant to conspiratorial. The restaurant was emptying, the lively buzz replaced by the quiet clinking of staff cleaning up. "Miss," he began, his voice a low, slick murmur. "I need a word with you. In private." A knot of unease tightened in Paloma's stomach. "Is there something wrong with your service, sir?" "On the contrary," he said, giving her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your service has been impeccable. That's why I know you're a professional. Someone who understands discretion." He gestured to the chair opposite him. Hesitantly, Paloma sat her apron, feeling crinkled and stained in his pristine presence. From the corner of her eye, she saw that Mr. Ellsworth was still there, nursing his now cold coffee, seemingly lost in thought. But she had the distinct, unnerving feeling that he was listening. Gregory Shaw leaned forward, the expensive scent of his cologne washing over Paloma. He placed his leather briefcase on the table, clicking it open with two sharp, decisive snaps. The action felt strangely theatrical, designed to command her full attention. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries, shall we?" Shaw said, his voice dropping even lower. "I'm a man who believes in rewarding talent and incentivizing cooperation. You've been professional, attentive. You see things. You hear things." Paloma's posture stiffened. "I'm a waitress, Mr. Shaw. I serve food." "Don't be modest." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "This place is a hub. Deals are made. Secrets are whispered over a bottle of Merlot. I'm interested in one particular secret." He slid a photograph across the table. It was a candid shot of the man in the corner booth, Ambrose Ellsworth, exiting a sleek black car. That man. He's been a frequent diner here for the past month, always at this time, always in this section. Paloma glanced at the photo, and then at the man himself. He was looking down at his phone now, seemingly oblivious. "I've served him a few times, yes. He's a quiet customer." "I'm sure he is," Shaw said, his eyes glinting. "Ambrose Ellsworth values his privacy. He's in the final stages of a very sensitive negotiation, the Auratech acquisition. I have a vested interest in its outcome. All I need is a small piece of information. A name he might mention on a phone call, a document he might glance at. Anything." Paloma felt a cold dread creep up her spine. This wasn't a request. It was a proposition. A dirty one. "Sir, my customer's privacy is part of my job. I couldn't possibly—" Shaw cut her off, not with words, but by opening his briefcase further. Inside were neat stacks of $100 bills. The sight of it made the air leave Paloma's lungs. It was an obscene amount of money, an impossible amount. $20,000, Shaw said, his voice a silken weapon. Cash, tax-free. A finder's fee, let's call it, for one tiny, insignificant piece of information. A name, a date, that's all. $20,000. The number exploded in Paloma's mind. It wasn't just a number, it was a solution. It was 2 months of the experimental treatment for Leo. It was catching up on the rent. It was a cushion, a breath of air in an ocean of debt. It was the answer to a prayer she was too tired to even utter anymore. Her mind raced a torrent of justification and temptation. Who would it hurt, a tiny piece of information from a man who probably wouldn't even notice? Ellsworth was a millionaire, a billionaire for all she knew. This would be a drop in the bucket to him. But for her, for Leo, it was everything. She thought of Leo's weakening grip on her hand. She thought of the doctor's grave, pitying eyes. She thought of the eviction notice she'd hidden under her mattress. The money on the table wasn't just paper. It was hope. It was a chance. Shaw saw the conflict warring in her eyes and pressed his advantage. Think about it, Paloma. No one will ever know. A simple whisper. It's a victimless act. In the world of business, this is how the game is played. You're just a pawn, but I'm offering you a chance to be a queen, if only for a little while. What could this money do for you? Her hands, resting in her lap, were trembling. She clenched them into fists, her short, clean nails digging into her palms. She looked from the money to Shaw's predatory smile, and then involuntarily her gaze drifted to the corner booth. Ambrose Ellsworth had put his phone down. He was looking directly at them now. His expression was unreadable, a blank mask of quiet observation. But his eyes seemed to see right through her, past the starched apron, and the polite smile into the desperate, terrified heart of her dilemma. Their gazes locked for a fraction of a second, and in that moment something shifted inside Paloma. It was the memory of her mother's voice, frail but firm on her deathbed. Integrity, Paloma. It's the one thing people can't take from you unless you give it away. It was the thought of facing Leo, of reading him stories about honorable knights and valiant heroes, knowing she had sold her own honor for a stack of cash. The money could save Leo's body, perhaps. But what would it do to her soul? What kind of lesson would she be teaching him if she took the easy, corrupt path? They had nothing, but they had their name. They had their character. It was the only inheritance their parents had left them. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Paloma pushed the photograph back across the table toward Gregory Shaw. She met his gaze, and for the first time that night, her own was clear and unwavering. "No," she said, her voice quiet, but ringing with a finality that surprised even herself. Shaw's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, I don't think I heard you correctly." "I said no," Paloma repeated, standing up. The chair scraped against the floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Mr. Ellsworth's privacy is not for sale. My integrity is not for sale. Please pay your bill and leave." For a moment, Shaw stared at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. He had offered a drowning woman a life raft, and she had pushed it away. He saw it not as an act of principle, but as a personal insult. "You foolish girl," he hissed, his charm vanishing to reveal a raw, ugly anger. "You have no idea what you just threw away. You'll be slinging hash in this dive for the rest of your miserable life." He snapped the briefcase, shut the sound like a gunshot. He threw a few bills onto the table, more than enough to cover his check, and stormed out of the restaurant, bumping a chair in his haste. The silence he left behind was heavy and suffocating. Paloma stood, trembling, her adrenaline fading, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep weariness, and the sickening ache of the choice she had made. The $20,000, the lifeline for Leo, was gone. Doubt, cold and sharp, began to prick at her resolve. Had she just made the biggest mistake of her life? Then a voice from the corner cut through the silence, calm and low. "Miss Darcy." She turned. Ambrose Ellsworth was standing by his table, his suit jacket now in his hand. He had heard everything. Paloma's heart hammered against her ribs. He had heard. The quiet man in the corner had been the silent audience to her moral crucible. Humiliation washed over her, followed by a surge of defensive anger. Had this all been some kind of sick game for him? "Sir," she said, her voice tight. "I apologize for that scene. I can assure you that there's no need to apologize." Ambrose Ellsworth interrupted, taking a step closer. His eyes, which had been unreadable from a distance, were a startling shade of hazel, and they held a look of intense analytical curiosity. "I should be thanking you." Paloma blinked, confused. "Thanking me for what? For reminding me that it still exists. That what still exists, integrity." He said simply the word, holding a profound weight. Character. The willingness to do the right thing when the wrong thing is so much easier and more profitable. He walked past her and picked up the bills Shaw had thrown on the table, smoothing them out. He added them to his own check, which he had already placed in the small black folder. Then he turned back to her. "I am the CEO of Ellsworth Industries." He stated not with arrogance, but as a matter of fact. "The Aura Tech acquisition Mr. Shaw mentioned is one of the most significant deals of my career. The information he was trying to buy from you is worth, conservatively, about $90 million to my competitor." The number was so vast, so astronomical, that Paloma couldn't even process it. 90 million. And Shaw had offered her 20,000. She felt a wave of nausea. She hadn't just refused a bribe, she had safeguarded a fortune without even knowing it. I had no idea," she stammered. "I know," Ambrose said. "That's the point. You didn't refuse him because of the stakes involved for me. You refused him because of the stakes involved for you, for your own conscience." He paused, his gaze searching her face. "I've been coming here for a month, Paloma. I've watched you handle rude customers, comfort a crying child, and work a 12-hour shift without a single complaint. Tonight wasn't a random occurrence. It was a test, and you passed in a way I no longer thought was possible." "A test?" The word hung in the air, sharp and unpleasant. "You were testing me." "Not intentionally at first," he admitted. "I was observing. I've learned more about people's true character by watching them interact with service staff than I ever have in a boardroom. But when Shaw approached you, yes, it became a test. I could have intervened, but I wanted to see what you would do." Paloma felt a renewed flicker of anger. She had been a specimen in his social experiment. Her desperate, gut-wrenching decision had been a data point for a billionaire's study of human nature. Before she could voice her indignation, he continued, his tone softening slightly. "I understand you may be angry, and you have every right to be. But what I saw was extraordinary. People with your kind of fortitude are 1 in a million. They are the foundation upon which great enterprises are built. Ellsworth Industries is always looking for such people." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a slim, elegant business card. He held it out to her. "Ambrose Ellsworth, CEO, Ellsworth Industries. I have a position opening in my executive office," he said. "It's an administrative role, but it's a gateway. It requires discretion, intelligence, and above all, unimpeachable integrity. The salary would be substantially more than you make here. It would also come with the best private health insurance plan in the country. Health insurance." The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. The best in the country. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a door swinging open, a light flooding the dark, terrifying tunnel she had been trapped in with Leo. She stared at the card, then back at his face. Her mind was reeling, trying to catch up with the whiplash of the last 10 minutes, from desperation to temptation, from refusal to revelation. It felt unreal. Why? She finally managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. Why me? I'm a waitress. I don't have a business degree. I don't know the first thing about corporate acquisitions. I can teach someone business, Ambrose said, his gaze steady and direct. I can't teach them character. That's innate. You have it. The rest is just details. I'm not offering you charity, Miss D'Arcy. I'm making a strategic investment in a high-value asset. Your integrity is that asset. He placed the card on the table beside Shaw's crumpled money. My assistant Patricia will be expecting your call. The position is yours if you want it. No interview necessary. Your interview was tonight, and you aced it. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and turned to leave. Paloma watched him walk away, a tall, solitary figure, cutting through the now empty restaurant. He moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of immense power held in careful reserve. Paloma looked down at the table. On one side lay the messy, tainted cash from a man who believed everyone had a price. On the other lay a crisp, clean business card from a man who had just shown her that some things were priceless. She thought of Leo. She thought of the hospital bills. She thought of the promise to her mother. This wasn't a bribe. It was an opportunity earned not by deceit but by its refusal. With a hand that was now surprisingly steady, she picked up the business card. The weight of her promise to Leo suddenly felt a little lighter, replaced by the fragile, terrifying, and exhilarating weight of a new beginning. The transition from the warm, chaotic intimacy of the Gilded Spoon to the cold, silent precision of Ellsworth Industries was like stepping onto another planet. The corporate headquarters was a monument of glass and steel, a skyscraper that pierced the clouds and seemed to hum with a quiet, relentless energy. Paloma's first day felt less like a job and more like an infiltration. Her worn-out loafers squeaked on the polished marble floors of the lobby. Her simple black blazer, the best thing in her closet, felt woefully inadequate next to the designer suits and clicking heels of the people striding past her with an air of detached importance. Ambrose Ellsworth's executive suite was on the 80th floor, a space so high up the city below looked like a circuit board. His personal assistant, Patricia, a woman in her late 50s, with a perfectly coiffed silver bob and an expression of serene command, greeted Paloma with a handshake that was both firm and brief. "Mr. Ellsworth has already briefed me," Patricia said, her voice crisp. "Your station is here. You'll be handling his secondary schedule, managing internal correspondence, and acting as a primary filter for his project managers. Your first task is to familiarize yourself with the Auratech file. You need to know it inside and out." The station was a large oak desk with a computer that looked more powerful than her entire apartment. The Auratech file was a digital folder containing thousands of documents, spreadsheets, and legal briefs. It was terrifying. The first few weeks were a blur of overwhelming information and quiet observation. Paloma was a quick study, her years of memorizing complex dinner orders and managing a dozen tables at once, translating surprisingly well to juggling schedules and prioritizing data. She learned the corporate jargon, the names of the key players, and the subtle currents of power that flowed through the office. But learning the job was the easy part. Fitting in was another matter entirely. The story of her hiring had spread through the executive floor like wildfire, albeit in a warped, sensationalized version. She was the waitress, the one the boss had hired on a whim. To her colleagues, she was a curiosity, a disruption to the established order. They were polite to her face, but their whispers followed her down the hallways. Her main antagonist was Brenda, an ambitious junior executive who worked in the marketing department. Brenda, with her sharp suits and even sharper tongue, had made it clear she believed Paloma had gotten the job through some unsavory means. "I just don't get it," Brenda lamented loudly over coffee in the break room one morning, knowing full well Paloma was within earshot. "I have an MBA from Wharton. I've been with this company for 3 years. And a waitress gets a desk on the executive floor because she poured the boss a good cup of coffee. It devalues all of our hard work." Paloma learned to ignore the comments, channeling her energy into her work. She arrived early, stayed late, and meticulously double-checked every task. She was determined to prove Ambrose Ellsworth's strategic investment was a sound one. Her new salary was, as promised, life-changing. The first paycheck felt like a miracle. She immediately paid 3 months of rent in advance, and most importantly, enrolled Leo in the experimental treatment program. The relief that washed over her as she signed the paperwork was so profound it brought tears to her eyes. The private health insurance provided by Ellsworth Industries was a safety net she'd never dreamed of having. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Ambrose was a demanding but fair boss. He was distant, often absorbed in his work, but he would occasionally stop by her desk to check on her progress. He never mentioned the night at the restaurant again, treating her as he would any other employee. Yet Paloma felt his watchful eye on her. He wasn't just observing her work. He seemed to be studying her, gauging her adaptation to this new alien environment. One evening she was working late, trying to decipher a particularly dense financial projection for the Tech deal. The office was empty, the city lights twinkling outside the vast window. She hadn't realized Ambrose was still there until he spoke from the doorway of his office. "Still here, Miss Darcy?" Paloma jumped, startled. "Oh, Mr. Ellsworth. Yes, I was just trying to get a handle on the Q3 revenue forecasts for Tech's subsidiary." He walked over to her desk, loosening his tie. He looked tired. "They're intentionally convoluted. Tech's CFO likes to hide liabilities in plain sight. Look at footnote 7b on page 43. Cross-reference it with the asset depreciation schedule." He leaned over her shoulder, pointing to a specific line on the screen. Paloma was acutely aware of his presence, the faint scent of coffee and clean laundry soap. It was a stark contrast to the overpowering cologne Gregory Shaw had worn. For a few minutes, he guided her through the labyrinthine document, his explanations clear and concise. "You see it now?" he asked. "Yes," Paloma said, a genuine excitement in her voice. "They've been amortizing their development costs over a 10-year period, but the tech will be obsolete in 5. They're inflating their net worth." Ambrose looked at her, a flicker of something like pride in his eyes. "Exactly. You have a good analytical mind. I used to have to calculate which bills to pay to keep the lights on, and which ones could wait another week," Paloma said with a small, wry smile. "It's just bigger numbers now." The personal admission hung in the air between them. It was the first time she had alluded to her past struggles. He straightened up the professional distance, returning, but not entirely. "Well, your calculations are proving invaluable. Go home, Paloma. Get some rest." He called her Paloma, not Miss Darcy. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. As she packed her bag and rode the silent elevator down 80 floors, Paloma realized she wasn't just surviving in this new world anymore. She was starting to understand it. But her rapid ascent and the CEO's growing trust in her had not gone unnoticed. In the shadows of the corporate structure, resentment festered. And across town, a humiliated and vengeful Gregory Shaw had not forgotten the waitress who had cost him a fortune and made him look like a fool. He was a patient man, and he believed that every person, no matter how principled, had a breaking point. He was just waiting for the right moment to apply the pressure. Months bled into one another, and Paloma's life found a new rhythm. The frantic, exhausting tempo of the restaurant was replaced by the demanding, intellectually stimulating pace of the corporate world. She no longer just served Ambrose Ellsworth, she worked alongside him. She anticipated his needs, organized his chaotic schedule into a semblance of order, and slowly but surely became the gatekeeper to the most powerful man in the company. Her insights, born from a life of observing people from the periphery, were surprisingly sharp. She could read a room, sense the tension in a negotiation, and often spotted the small human details that the high-flying executives missed. Ambrose began to rely on her for more than just administrative tasks. He'd ask for her opinion on internal memos, on personnel choices, even on marketing strategies. "What do you think, Paloma?" became a common question in his office. "You have a better sense of how this will play to the average person than anyone else in this room." Their late-night work sessions became more frequent. In the quiet solitude of the 80th floor, with the city sleeping below, the professional armor began to show cracks. They talked about more than just business. He learned about Leo's progress, the new treatment was working, and the boy was slowly regaining his strength. He was a good listener, his focused attention making her feel like what she was saying was the most important thing in the world. In turn, she learned about him. She learned he was an orphan, raised in a series of foster homes, and had built his empire from nothing but sheer grit and a brilliant mind. She learned why integrity was so important to him. His first major business partner had embezzled millions, nearly bankrupting him. And his ex-fiancée, a woman he had deeply loved, had left him after discovering he had put the bulk of his fortune in a trust she couldn't touch before their wedding. "I built walls," he admitted one night, staring out at the city lights. Not to keep people out, but to see who cared enough to climb them. Paloma realized she had scaled those walls without even trying, simply by being herself on a night when she thought no one of consequence was watching. A deep, unspoken bond was forming between them, a connection forged in mutual respect and a shared understanding of what it meant to be alone in the world. The way he looked at her was changing too. The analytical curiosity was being replaced by a warmth that made her heart beat a little faster. But as their professional and personal relationship deepened, so did the resentment from others. Brenda in particular watched their growing rapport with a venomous jealousy. Her career had stalled while the Waitress was now the CEO's most trusted confidant. It was this festering resentment that Gregory Shaw had been waiting for. Shaw hadn't been idle. He had been investigating Paloma, digging into her past, looking for a weakness. But he found none. Her record was clean, her life humble and hardworking. He realized he couldn't break her directly, so he decided to break her reputation instead. He needed a pawn inside Ellsworth Industries, someone with access and a motive. He found the perfect candidate in Brenda. He didn't approach her with a briefcase full of cash. He was smarter than that. He arranged a chance meeting at an industry conference. He listened patiently to her complaints about her stalled career and her barely veiled bitterness toward Paloma. "It's a classic story," Shaw said, sympathetically swirling the wine in his glass. "The boss gets infatuated with the new shiny object. It's unfair to dedicated people like you. What if I told you there was a way to expose her for what she really is, a fraud, a corporate spy?" He spun a convincing tale. He claimed to have evidence that Paloma was secretly feeding information to a rival firm, his firm, ironically. He told Brenda that he was a victim just like her. "All I need is confirmation," Shaw said smoothly. "Something from inside the company that proves she has access to sensitive files she shouldn't. If you could get me that you'd not only be a hero to the company, you'd expose a traitor and clear the path for your own advancement. He was playing on Brenda's ambition and her jealousy, masterfully turning her into an unwitting instrument of his revenge. He wasn't asking her to steal anything major, just to plant a seed of doubt, to provide a piece of evidence that he could then twist. Brenda, blinded by her own resentment, took the bait. She began watching Paloma, misinterpreting her late nights with Ambrose as clandestine activities. A few days later, using a password she had gleaned by watching over Paloma's shoulder, she accessed Paloma's computer after hours. She copied a low-level, non-critical project file onto a USB drive, a file Paloma had been legitimately working on. To make it look more suspicious, Brenda also accessed the main Auratech acquisition folder, leaving a digital fingerprint that would point directly to Paloma's user profile. She passed the USB drive to Shaw, feeling a thrill of righteous victory. She believed she was protecting the company and exposing a charlatan. Shaw now had exactly what he needed. He didn't care about the file on the drive. What he cared about was the digital trail Brenda had created. He anonymously tipped off a member of the Ellsworth Industries Board of Directors, a man known for his rigid, by-the-book approach. The tip was simple. You have a leak on the 80th floor. Her name is Paloma Darcy. Check the server logs for the Auratech file. The trap was set. The digital evidence was irrefutable. Paloma's user ID had accessed the most sensitive file in the company at an unauthorized time. The file Brenda had copied while harmless would be presented as proof of the data that was stolen. Ambrose Ellsworth's ultimate test was about to begin. Not a test of Paloma's integrity, but a test of his own. A test of whether he would trust the evidence of his own eyes and systems, or the quiet, unwavering belief he had in the woman he had hired from a restaurant. His walls were about to be put to the ultimate test from the inside. The call came from Walter Jennings, the most senior member of the Ellsworth Industries board. His voice was grim and laced with an "I told you so" satisfaction that set Ambrose's teeth on edge. Jennings had been vocally skeptical of Ambrose's unorthodox hiring of a waitress. "Ambrose, we have a situation," Jennings said, forgoing any pleasantries. "A serious security breach. It's Darcy." When Ambrose arrived at the emergency board meeting, the atmosphere was arctic. The company's head of IT security presented the evidence on a large screen. The server logs clear as day, Paloma Darcy's unique user ID accessing the Auratech Master Deal folder at 10:47 p.m. 2 nights prior. Then the anonymous tip. Then the discovery that a peripheral project file had been copied to an external device. The narrative was simple, damning, and complete. "It's an open and shut case," Jennings concluded, looking at Ambrose with cold, disappointed eyes. She was Shaw's mole all along. He likely paid her off months ago. Her little integrity act at the restaurant was probably a charade to get inside. You brought a viper into the nest, Ambrose. Your sentimentality has put this entire $90 million deal at risk. Every logical part of Ambrose's brain screamed that they were right. The evidence was digital, impartial, and absolute. His past experiences with betrayal echoed in his mind, his old partner, his ex-fiancée. He was a fool for trusting so easily again. He walked back to his office, his face a mask of stone. Paloma was at her desk, organizing his schedule for the following day. She looked up and smiled at him, a warm, genuine smile that suddenly felt like a punch to the gut. "Was it all a lie, Paloma?" he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "My office. Now." Inside, he closed the door and faced her. He didn't know how to start. He felt a rage building inside him, rage at her for her apparent betrayal, but also at himself for being so blind. "The board just concluded a meeting," he began, his voice dangerously quiet. Our servers were breached. The Auratech file was accessed from your computer." The color drained from Paloma's face. She stared at him, her expression one of utter, uncomprehending shock. "What, that's impossible. I would never—" "The logs don't lie." "Paloma," he cut her off, the accusation hanging heavy and poisonous between them. 10:47 p.m. 2 nights ago. Did you do it? Did Shaw finally make you an offer you couldn't refuse? The question, so laden with his own history of mistrust, struck Paloma harder than a physical blow. It wasn't just an accusation of corporate espionage. It was a fundamental rejection of everything he had claimed to value in her. He didn't believe her. After everything, he didn't believe her. Tears pricked her eyes, hot with hurt and fury. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "No. After all this, after everything we've talked about, you can stand there and ask me that. What am I supposed to think?" He shot back his own pain, making him cruel. "The evidence is absolute. Evidence can be manipulated," she retorted, her mind racing. This was a setup. It had to be. Sure, it smelled of his vindictive, underhanded tactics. Think Ambrose who benefits from this Shaw, who hates me for embarrassing at them. Shaw who would want to drive a wedge between us and discredit me in your eyes. Her passion, her fierce, wounded defense gave him a moment's pause. This wasn't the reaction of a guilty person caught in a lie. This was the outrage of an innocent person betrayed. He saw the same fire in her eyes he'd seen the night she'd stood up to Shaw at the restaurant. His anger began to recede, replaced by a sliver of doubt in the absolute evidence. He had built his empire on logic and data, but his greatest successes had come from trusting his gut. And his gut was screaming that Paloma was telling the truth. 2 nights ago, Paloma said, thinking aloud, her brain kicking into high gear. "I was working late, we both were. I left around 10:15. You walked me to the elevator." "I did." Ambrose confirmed his own memory, clicking into place. "The log says 10:47. You were already gone." "So someone had to use my computer after I left," Paloma reasoned. "Who else was here? Who has access?" Her mind cycled through the possibilities. Patricia, the cleaning crew. And then it hit her. Brenda. Brenda from marketing, Ambrose asked, skeptical. "Why would she—" "She was here," Paloma said, remembering. "I saw her at her desk when I was leaving. She said she was pulling an all-nighter on the new ad campaign. She's never been subtle about how much she resents me being here." Paloma's waitress instincts, the ones that noticed every detail, were firing on all cylinders. "She asked me for my password last week. She said her system was down and she needed to print a document from my station. I was busy, I didn't think. I typed it in for her. She must have seen it. It was circumstantial, but it was a thread, a tiny thread to pull on." "It's not enough," Ambrose said, but his tone had changed. He was no longer her accuser, he was her collaborator. "We need proof." "Security cameras," Paloma said immediately. "The hallways are covered. The camera outside this office would have seen who came in here after I left." "Jennings already had security pull the footage," Ambrose said, a grim look on his face. "There's a 17-minute glitch in the recording, from 10:40 to 10:57 p.m. They're saying it's a sign of a professional hack." "Or a convenient power failure," Paloma shot back, refusing to give up. "What about the elevators? The keycard logs for the main entrance? Brenda had to leave the building at some point." Ambrose was already moving to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up the building's central security database. "Keycard log. Got it. Brenda logged out of the building at 11:15 p.m. He paused, and logged back in 20 minutes later. She came back. Why would she come back? Paloma wondered aloud. Ambrose's eyes narrowed. Maybe she forgot something, or maybe she was meeting someone. He pulled up the exterior camera footage, scrubbing to the time Brenda re-entered the building. The camera angle was wide, showing the street in front. Brenda walked into the frame, but she wasn't alone. For a brief moment, before she entered the revolving doors, she paused to speak to a man in a parked black sedan. The car's window was down. The camera caught a clear shot of the driver's face. It was Gregory Shaw. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Brenda wasn't the mastermind. She was the pawn. Shaw had used her jealousy to frame Paloma and get his revenge. He had likely orchestrated the camera glitch and convinced Brenda to return to the building to create an alibi or pass him the stolen file. "I've got you, you son of a bitch," Ambrose whispered, staring at Shaw's face on the screen. He looked at Paloma. Her face was pale but resolute. In that moment, he felt a wave of shame for ever doubting her, and an overwhelming surge of admiration. She hadn't just claimed to have integrity. She had lived it, defended it, and used her own sharp mind to fight back when everything was on the line. "Jennings is going to get the call of his life," Ambrose said, a cold, dangerous smile touching his lips for the first time. "But first, I think Brenda owes us an explanation, Duarso." The confrontation with Brenda was swift and brutal. Faced with the undeniable video evidence of her meeting with Gregory Shaw, she crumbled. Through a torrent of tears, she confessed everything: Shaw's manipulation, her own jealousy, the way she had accessed Paloma's computer. She was a pawn, just as Paloma and Ambrose had suspected, but her actions had been driven by a bitterness that had made her reckless. Ambrose was ruthless in his response. Brenda was fired, immediately escorted from the building, with a clear message that charges of corporate espionage would be waived only if she provided a full written confession detailing Shaw's involvement. For Shaw, the consequences were far more severe. Armed with Brenda's confession and the video evidence, Ambrose's legal team descended upon Shaw Global with the force of a hurricane. They didn't just sue, they initiated a full investigation into Shaw's unethical business practices, using the attempted frame job as the linchpin. The scandal that erupted was catastrophic for Shaw. His reputation was shattered, his investors pulled out, and his company was left in ruins. In the aftermath, Ambrose called another emergency board meeting. He presented the new evidence with cold, quiet fury. The contrition from Walter Jennings and the other board members was immediate and absolute. They had allowed their prejudice to blind them to the truth. They offered Paloma a formal, public apology. But for Paloma, the vindication was bittersweet. The ordeal had shown her how fragile her new life was, how quickly it could be snatched away by the whims and cruelties of others. It had also shown her Ambrose's moment of doubt, a scar that wouldn't easily fade. That evening, she found him standing by the vast window in his office, the same spot where they had begun to share their stories. "I'm sorry, Paloma," he said, without turning around, "for doubting you, even for a second. It was a failure on my part. My past got in the way of my present." "You came around," she said softly, walking to stand beside him. "You chose to trust me when it mattered. That's what counts." He finally turned to face her, and the look in his eyes held a vulnerability she had never seen before. "It's more than that. When I saw that evidence, my first instinct was to retreat, to rebuild the walls. But you didn't let me. You fought. You forced me to see the truth. You saved me from my own cynicism." He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a current of warmth through her. "When I hired you, I said it was a strategic investment. That was true, but it's become something more. The Aura-Tech deal is closing tomorrow. It will be the biggest acquisition in this company's history. but it's not the most valuable one I've made this year." His gaze was intense, unwavering. "I don't want you to be my administrative assistant anymore, Paloma." Paloma's heart sank for a split second, a flicker of fear that he was letting her go. "I want you to be my partner." He continued, his voice thick with emotion. "And I don't just mean in business. I'm not offering you a position because I feel I owe you something. I'm offering it because I can't imagine running this company or my life without your insight, your strength, and your integrity beside me." Tears welled in Paloma's eyes, but this time they were not of hurt or fear. They were tears of profound, overwhelming joy. This was not a fairy tale rescue. This was a partnership offered between two people who had seen each other at their worst and chosen to believe in their best. She had earned this, not just by refusing a bribe, but by staying true to herself in a world that constantly tried to force her to be something else. "Yes," she whispered. A few weeks later, Paloma stood with Ambrose in the bright, cheerful wing of St. Benedict's Hospital. Leo, looking healthier and stronger than he had in years, was showing Ambrose the finer points of a video game, laughing as Ambrose struggled with the controls. The experimental treatment was a success. He was on the road to a full recovery. Watching them, Paloma felt a sense of peace settle over her. Her life was no longer about survival. It was about building. She had fought her dragons not with a sword, but with her character. She had found that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in trust, in respect, and in the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you had chosen the right path, no matter how difficult it was. And in Ambrose, she had found someone who didn't just see her value, but who valued her for who she truly was. Together, they looked out at the future, a skyline of limitless possibility. They would build on a foundation of solid, unshakable integrity. Paloma Darcy's story reminds us that the most significant tests of our character rarely happen in the spotlight. They happen in the quiet moments when we think no one is watching, when the easy wrong is far more tempting than the difficult right. Her journey from a struggling waitress to a corporate leader wasn't about luck or a fairy tale romance. It was the direct result of a single powerful choice rooted in integrity. It proves that true strength isn't about the power you can wield, but about the principles you refuse to sacrifice. In a world that often rewards the loudest and the most ruthless, stories like this are a powerful reminder that character is and always will be the ultimate currency. If this story moved you, and you believe in the power of integrity, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribing to our channel for more stories that inspire. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a moment where your integrity was put to the test? Thank you for watching.